Wonder, though, if he and his family don't probably view post-NFL career things like that a place like Georgia is probably a pretty good place for him to make his home. Once you have the interception like that leads to a national championship, regardless of where his pro career goes after that, making your home in Georgia and kind of being in your post-career life a guy that becomes very good at celebrating that national championship season, telling that story well. John Stinchcomb and I have talked about this. That's a lot of the Georgia heroes over the years. Buck Bellew, Lindsey Scott from the 1980 Florida game, Verron Haynes, David Green from the Hobnail Boot game, and all these various guys that become a part of Georgia history. One of the things that you see, Frank Ross from the Herschel Walker, guys like that as well from 1980, they just become really good at telling these stories. And I'm guessing that Kelee Ringo is going to get a chance to tell the story of his interception so many times over and over again that one of these days he's going to be the grizzled vet, polished guy who steps up there and gives the same rubber chicken circuit speech that he's given 8,000 times before, because literally people will never get tired of it. Keelee's got a chance to make himself a lot of money for a long time just being Kelee Ringo because of what happened. Thomas T-Bone 86, yes, I did hear. Georgia basketball getting a win last night over Alabama. Boy, tough time for the Crimson Tide as of late. You had the loss to Georgia in the national championship game. Nick Saban getting sloppy seconds with Kirby Smart visiting Arch Manning the other day. Saban kind of a day late and $1 short on that. You had obviously the basketball loss last night. It's been a little bit of a rough run for the Crimson Tide as of late, for sure. Randy Hall says, how would you not have a great passing game with Judy, Ruggs, Smith, Cooper? Yeah, I mean, and by the way, let's welcome in all the other platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. We're going to finish a few more comments in our first and 15. We'll get going with the regular show after that coming up in a little bit. But I believe that's true, that when you do have that level of wide receiver play, and I also think it's kind of interesting when you look at, some of the guys, like how Alabama even got those recruits, I think, to a certain extent is a little bit interesting. How you recruit that many great guys in one signing class, I think is actually pretty fascinating all the way around. And as Randy mentioned, it kind of starts with Amari Cooper, and then you kind of roll into Calvin Ridley. So you had a little bit of a lead into that. But sometimes I wonder, was Amari Cooper and Calvin Ridley, that history of those guys playing in the Saban era at Alabama, was that enough to win with that many elite recruits at one time? And then obviously what happened with Jalen Waddle the following signing class. So nobody can deny this. Alabama has been great at getting wide receiver play. They have cultivated very good wide receivers. They've recruited the position really well. Nobody can deny that. Nobody can deny that. Steve Highland checking in from NorCal. Sounds like he's having a little trouble with his keyboard. Hate to hear that. Steve Highland on the subject of Bama as a basketball school. Yeah, I was having some fun with that. Randy Hall also mentions Kamar Wheaton, the five-star Alabama running back, former five-star, leaving the program. I find that to be pretty interesting too. That's one of those things that you can't help but notice, that Wheaton was a big addition to Alabama when he showed up, but just as quickly as he came, seems to be leaving. So that's worth paying a little bit of attention to of where that's going from here. Because I don't get the impression right now that maybe, obviously, the first thing a Georgia fan thinks about is, hey, 5 stars in the market. Is this a guy for Georgia? Right now, I think that Georgia's just trying to find touches for all the running backs it does have. I don't know that Kamar Wheaton necessarily fits into the picture here, but it is a high-profile loss for Alabama at a time in which a lot of folks are making a little bit of a deal about the high-profile gain of Jermaine Burton. A couple other things. We'll start with the regular show. Brad Hotnett on the subject of so Mike is actually, I think, on vacation right now. Mike will be back with us again next week. We'll talk to Jeff on Friday, and then we'll probably do an extra thing with him at some point next week, maybe. But we're actually going to have former Georgia wide receiver Sean Bailey stopping by the program today. Sean, I think, is a good guy to talk about because, anytime he's ever been on the show, I've always been really fascinated with his perspective. Big fan of the Dogs, obviously, and a big hero of a big win for UGA there, too, going back to the 2005 SEC title game. He had a very big performance that day for the Dogs. But, he was teammate of Brian McClendon. McClendon's kind of gotten some chatter as of late as a potential wide receiver coach. Just some general thoughts on things like that. I think that Bailey's going to be a good guest related to all that. We'll do that with him here in a moment. All right. So, good stuff. getting ready to get going. Let me read Kat's story here, and we'll get going after that. Kat's story says, something that's bothered me the last couple of seasons, the increase in injuries. Can some of this be tweaked with improvements to our conditioning? I'm still a big believer, whether it be, look at all the wide receiver injuries that Alabama's had. They've had Jameson, they've had Jalen Waddle, they've had John Mechie, and a couple years before that, it was a bunch of linebackers. A couple of years ago, Auburn had a big run of defensive back injuries. For the most part, I am just a believer that football is a very tough, almost violent sport, and that injuries are just a byproduct of playing a game with this level of athlete at that level of competition, that I just think that injuries are a part of it. That I am the last one to say there's someone or something that can be blamed for injuries. I just don't really think that way. And obviously, you want your physical condition to be as good as it can be, and not to say that you can't have some physical conditioning injuries, things like that. But for the most part, when we see an injury or we see a multiple number of injuries in the same position group, I think we have a tendency to want to make that be a narrative when it's just probably just bad luck. So I still, for the most part, am kind of the believer on that. But good comments. And as I said before we are done, Richard D says, I love your observations of players just going out and being great, not making excuses of outside influences. Yeah, I mean, that to me, Richard, is really important, really important. And obviously, if you're a coach, you're going to say everything you can to get a guy to consider leaving his current program and coming to your program. We just know that's going to go on. But hopefully, that there is a voice in the head of most players that's louder than a lot of the lies you hear in recruiting of, oh, so-and-so coach doesn't like you. If you came here, you'd be an All-American. Or so-and-so system doesn't promote you. If you came here, you'd be an All-American. Make this about more than just Jermaine Burton or whatever other individual player you want to talk about. The thing that's keeping any of us from greatness is not some sort of external factor, I believe. It's our own desire to be the best version of ourselves we can be. And really, if we pay attention to what exists in college football, it becomes a blueprint for the way in which a player becomes successful, the way in which a coach becomes successful, the way in which all that happens. Really becomes a blueprint for success in life. It's one of the reasons why I think it's good to pay attention to college football. It's one of the reasons why I want my kids to follow college football, especially my son. I want them to watch and see what works in college football, because what works to make you better in college football also works to make you better in life there as well. And for the most part in life, we don't tell people, hey, change your scenery and everything's going to work out better for you. That's not typically pretty good life advice, but that seems to be the prevailing wisdom when it comes to the transfer portal right now. Hard not to notice. Steve Highland, we'll make this, I promise, our last comment that we're going to get started. He says, Jalen Kimber to the lousy, stinking Gators more disturbing than Jermaine Burton going to Alabama. Honestly, I said this to Connor Riley yesterday, that the Kimber thing would be getting more reaction had he not announced it while Georgia was in the midst of celebrating a national championship parade. I believe that Florida thought it was going to be cute and try to steal some of Georgia's thunder to that day, and it just didn't work at all. That a lot of people, as crazy as it sounds, I think there's a decent number of folks who actually still don't know that Jalen Kimber went to Florida, because it was announced at a time in which it was totally overwhelmed by the national championship parade news. So had the Kimber thing happened on a different day, I think it would be getting a little bit more attention than it is. I just think that was a PR fail to the extent that Florida tried to orchestrate that. I think they failed in the way in which they did orchestrate that. But good stuff all the way around. We will continue the conversation after the show as part of our R.S. Andrews cool down. But for now, a little bit of recruiting stuff off the top. We'll be fair and balanced based on a big story we've covered a good bit here this week. We'll also look at the latest on Georgia's pursuit of a wide receivers coach. And we'll have, speaking of wide receivers, a great former wide receiver on the show today. Always fun to catch up with Sean Bailey. We'll do that coming up in a little bit there as well. So happy to have all of you with us. Fun time to be doing the show. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. And it begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
One of the things I really miss, and I won't pretend I don't, is the old school National Signing Day. I guess at times I'm probably just a little bit guilty of being old school, maybe excessively old school in a lot of things, but there is something I kind of miss about National Signing Day the way that it used to be, when everybody inked in February, when all those letters of intent came in on that one day. Don't really love it in December. I think there's a chance over the course of the next couple of years that might actually change. But, for now, the February version of National Signing Day has become a little bit of an afterthought. Most of the work gets done in December. Georgia also got a big announcement at the beginning of this month, near the beginning of this month, when Ernest Green, the four-star offensive lineman, made his public declaration of Georgia after having signed with the Dogs there in December. Great-looking four-star offensive lineman. But there is still a little bit of intrigue left in regards to what can happen for Georgia next Wednesday on National Signing Day. And off the top of the program for a couple of minutes, I want to spend some time on that right now. Georgia is in hot pursuit, it would seem, of a very good-looking, very highly rated defensive line prospect, Christian Miller, out of Miami. A couple things I want to show you from social media recently as it relates to Miller, and then kind of a bigger picture thought about how all this fits together. First of all, Miller, I think, is slated to be at Miami for the final weekend before you go dead to start the month of February, before actually everybody signs there on Wednesday. This leading into those final days to be able to recruit. In fact, Miller recently shared on social media a little bit of a photo there with Mario Cristobal, brand new Miami coach, being in home with Miller. Now, I still think this is probably more Georgia-Ohio State than anything, but interesting to see, Cristobal they're going in home, trying to work their way in with Christian Miller at the end of this process. Also, a big smile on the face of Miller. He's a great personality, the kind of guy that you want in this class. And by the way, not only are the Georgia coaches right now doing everything they can to make their pursuit of Miller and trying to make all that happen, but you've also got, parents of Georgia signees trying to do their thing on this too. One of the things we all love, and we've always been this way, this goes back to kind of the early stages of DawgNation and even really kind of the advent of social media as a big medium to follow the world of recruiting. We love these Georgia recruits that themselves become Georgia recruiters. And every now and then you have these parents that also become kind of famous for the same kind of thing. Think about, Chris Milton and his family when Kendall Milton first came to Georgia, or some of the various mothers. I remember, Rich LeCount's family, the way they kind of all kind of got energized by all this. Obviously, MJ Sherman's sister a few years ago. Georgia's such a big platform for players that sometimes even the family members of some of these players become pretty famous all the way around. I thought it was really funny the other day. Mary Delp, the mother of Oscar Delp, who's there's a great story, by the way, with Jeff Sintel and her at DawgNation.com, also kind of giving you a little bit of a behind-the-scenes look at how much fun a visit to Oscar was for UGA. And if you want kind of a behind-the-scenes account of what was going on with the Delp family and Kirby Smart, which is always kind of interesting to get a window into Kirby Smart in some of these kinds of things. She gave you some of that there as well. She's just a very big personality, very big fan of UGA, very proud of her son Oscar, the fact that he's got a chance to come to Georgia. She was also out there pushing for Christian Miller the other day on Twitter too. I think we have this we can show you. She says in regards to him, talking about maybe going to Miami, something like that, "Stop it, Christian. Come home. Oscar's waiting, along with the entire Dog Nation. I've already included you in my Thanksgiving dinner plans." She says, "Don't scrape me off." Very, very funny stuff there from Mary Delp, obviously making her push there for Christian Miller. Dog fans certainly like to see that. And I would assume that Georgia's in pretty good spot with Miller. I don't know that means I'm ready to rubber stamp, and I don't do crystal balls, things like that. I trust other experts to kind of do that thing, but I feel pretty good about where things stand with Georgia and Christian Miller. And a lot of this kind of centers back around on something that Connor Riley and I talked about yesterday. I started yesterday's show by saying, hey, if you look at the reasons why Georgia won the national championship in 2021, of all the things you could put on that list, the thing that might be at the very top of the list for me was Georgia putting an elite pass rush together, 49 total sacks, and how impressive that was. And we spent a good bit of time off the top of the show yesterday addressing what Georgia needs to do to replicate some version of that for next season. And when Connor came on, I thought he brought up a really good point, that I was kind of looking at this, kind of looking at that, and he's like, "BA, you got to remember now, the big thing that's absent from Georgia in 2021, in 2022 compared to what was there in 2021 are what could be 3 first-round defensive linemen. Jordan Davis almost certainly will be. Trayvon Walker, I would say, definitely will be. Devontae White, I think, has a really good chance himself of also being a first-round defensive lineman. That is an unbelievable haul of very impressive defensive line performance off this Georgia team here this year. And it's also quite a remarkable turnaround. I mean, one of the things I think was kind of a point of negative recruiting against Georgia for a pretty good while was that Georgia had a little bit of a drought in the NFL draft when it came to defensive linemen. That's about to change in a very big way. Wyatt Davis, Trayvon Walker are about to kick through the door of the NFL draft. All three have a very strong chance of having, especially in the case of Davis and Walker, but all three have a very strong chance of having their names called on the first night, that Thursday night there from Las Vegas. And all of a sudden now, this becomes a really good brand for Georgia to try to extend into the future. If you could tell me as a Georgia fan, if I could tell you as a Georgia fan that in the future, Georgia's going to keep looking to build the best defensive line in the country each and every year, that'd be the kind of thing that I would say would put you on the front steps of being able to compete for a national title each and every year as well. And that's kind of what this class for Georgia kind of has, the little bit of the makings of. Obviously, a lot of attention on a guy like Barry Alexander, and finishing off with a guy like Christian Miller gives you a chance to think about that same thing there as well. Now, one more thing related to recruiting. There is also another big name that's kind of in the mix. Georgia had a chance to host Shamar Stewart this past weekend. Stewart has not really been thought to be a Georgia lean. That's probably more of a Miami thing, more of a Texas A&M thing. But Georgia did get a chance to host him on campus. My assumption is they'll also be in home with him here this week too. Shamar put on Twitter, going back to his visit to UGA, kind of giving a shout out to UGA, said, had a good time in Georgia, but now I'm back home. He says, Miami, what's up? And obviously Miami is one of the schools that he's thinking about attending. And I don't have any new information right now that would lead me to tell you that anything all that different is going to work out with Stewart and Georgia now different than it was. But I will reiterate something I said on Friday when Jeff Santel was on the show. Now, this is a little bit of a crackpot theory, but my theory just a bit is that how you recruit a player that you know you're not going to get does tell me a lot. The same way you don't want a player to ever take a play off, that you want a wide receiver to run a hot, crisp route, even if he knows he's not going to get the football, or you want, edge rusher to go hard on every single play, even if he knows he's not going to have much of a chance to rush the passer on that particular snap, that particular rep. You just want everybody going hard on each and every play. Georgia going hard on every play here too, even for a guy like Shamar Stewart, who they are not 8-point spread favorite for, I think would say something about, UGA's willingness to just kind of go all out on every recruit. I don't even just mean from the standpoint of, hey, you never know how the transfer portal is going to work out, although I guess you never quite know that either. I just mean that the hallmark of Georgia under Kirby Smart has been this 100-mile-an-hour, no days off, maximizing every opportunity when it comes to recruiting. And a guy like Shamar Stewart is maybe also an example of that, even though ultimately Stewart's decision may land him in College Station, Miami. Certainly Georgia does not appear to be slowing down its recruitment of Shamar, which I think speaks well to the program all the way around. We'll do more recruiting stuff on Friday when Jeff Santel joins us. Also, Jeff's got Before the Hedges presented by Kroger tonight. Hope you will check that out. Let me kind of briefly, though, shift gears to this, and I guess you can sort of file this away in terms of just sort of fair and balanced. We have talked a lot about Jermaine Burton this week. Yesterday, when it was the aftermath of what McCole Hardman had said about that, we obviously made a big deal about Hardman's words because, frankly, Hardman, I think, spoke for a lot of Georgia fans when he said, how are you going to leave the team we just beat after you just won the national championship? I think Hardman's words were soothing to a lot of UGA fans, made them feel less crazy about the whole story, because just some of this just feels like a lot to process at one time. And McCole Hardman, I think, spoke for a lot of Georgia fans when he said what he said on Instagram. But as a way of being as fair as possible, because, listen, I don't want to just have the only viewpoint that ever gets expressed on this show be my own. I want to try to reflect other things there as well. So the same way in which Jermaine Burton had touted himself on social media, saying basically, this is my career, this is my chance to do whatever I want to do in response to something that 24/7 Sports put out, former Georgia defensive back Eric Stokes kind of said the same thing. So while we've expressed a little bit of frustration that Burton is going to what we view as Georgia's arch nemesis to help the team that Georgia just beat for a national championship, that feels a little too weird for us. I do want to show a little bit of support here for what Eric Stokes said, because Stokes kind of argued more in favor of Jermaine Burton. Let's at least be fair on that. Let me let you see this here. So Eric Stokes, who everybody likes, obviously a fan favorite, a former great player, Georgia, says, when the question is asked, do you agree with McCole Hardman, what he said about Jermaine Burton, Eric Stokes says, no, I don't agree with that, that Burton's doing something that he thinks is best for, and he puts this in all caps, his career. So why should you be worried about somebody else's choice? He says, stay in your lane. So Stokes actually coming back pretty hard. I don't know if that's coming hard at 24/7 or coming hard at Hardman. Maybe it's just more the 24/7 tweet, but pretty strongly worded statement there by Eric Stokes. The point is, I agree a lot more with McCole Hardman than I do Eric Stokes, but as an attempt of being fair and balanced, I at least wanted to show you a message from a former Dog that reflects a little bit different opinion than what we had on the show here before. So with all that said, there's a lot going on here at UGA. Getting ready for the start of the National Signing Day next Wednesday. Transfer portal still running wild around UGA, the rest of the SEC, and here on DawgNation Daily, we're going to do our part to cover all that for you as much as we possibly can. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Hello to you, and thanks for being with us no matter how you get to us today. 9:45, 1st and 15 on our DawgNation app and DawgNation.com. 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, of course, Radio Noon, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, podcast form wherever you find them. And I've got some good news. Now, I know this has been a little bit of a saga, and sometimes things in life just kind of are. But for a while, we had an issue with folks trying to listen to the podcast at the world-famous DawgNation.com. I would say that 90-something% of the people who listen to the podcast listen via a traditional podcast player, Apple, Spotify, something like that. But there are people, they're already on DawgNation.com. It's just kind of convenient to listen to the show right there on the site, and that's why we deliver the show via that platform. We try to make the show available on as many platforms as we can, even some platforms I can't even find. We just try to make the show available everywhere as much as possible. The DawgNation.com thing admittedly has not been working very well. I had tried to put a YouTube link to work around that, but the point is this. Finally, after talking to a lot of people who are way smarter than me, I do believe that is now fixed. I have been told that the issue where the show stops after 5 minutes, whatever else, that's not going to happen anymore. So we take it very seriously, your feedback. We had gotten some strongly worded feedback about the show not really working on DawgNation.com, and we have been working to get that fixed, and I'm happy to say I believe that is indeed what we did. So we have a special thing for you today. Mike Griffith, normally with us on Wednesday, will be back with us again next time. We're going to have former Georgia wide receiver Sean Bailey on the show. Now, Michael, I'm also running a little bit late here. We normally do Around the Doghouse here this time, and I think we have a fun Around the Doghouse that I want to look at here in a moment. But can we do this? Can we do this out of order? Can we go ahead and bring Sean on the show, and then we'll do Around the Doghouse after that? Because I'm running a little late, and I don't want to keep him waiting. I think Sean's going to be a fun guest. For those of you that are maybe not aware, Sean was a very good player at Georgia. Had a very big game for the Dogs, 2005 SEC championship. We've talked to him about that before. He's also a big fan of the program. You know, Sean, a sharp guy like him, former wide receiver, also a very important voice in a time like this where the wide receiver position at Georgia is very much a part of the conversation. And so we'll do some of this with Terrence Edwards tomorrow as we have the last few weeks. Terrence said some very pointed words. We'll have more on Terrence today on the show coming up there too. So we'll do a lot of that, but getting a chance to hear from some of these voices of guys who just know the situation, what it feels like to catch touchdowns in the SEC level and what it means to play wide receiver at this level. We have a chance to talk to people like that. Obviously, we're going to take the chance to do that. So with that in mind, here on DawgNation Daily, with a busy show to follow, let's get ready to say hello to former Georgia wide receiver Sean Bailey on the program right now. And it is a great pleasure to speak to Sean Bailey, just a great former player. One of my happy memories as a Dog fan is Sean's performance in the 2005 SEC title game. Over the years, we've talked a lot about that. And obviously the wide receiver position has been very much in the discussion for Georgia the last few days. So why not bring on another guy who knows what it takes to get it done this level? That's what Sean is. Sean, thanks for taking the time to be with us here today. Hope you're doing well, and I certainly appreciate you sharing some of your time with us.
Oh, definitely. No, my pleasure.
So let me begin with this. It's obviously been a happy time for Dog fans over the last few weeks. As an alumnus of the program yourself, how did it feel to see Georgia bring home that national championship back at the beginning of this month? How much fun was that for you, knowing just how long UGA fans have waited for this moment?
Oh, it was special. It was a long time coming. It's although I'm removed by 15, 20 years or so. It felt as if I was playing. That's how heartfelt that moment was. It was awesome to take in.
Yeah, I've talked to some former players such as yourself, and one of the things I do hear from time to time is when you're playing in the game, you have something to occupy your nerves, your anxiety. You have something to kind of focus your attention on. You don't have time to think about the magnitude of the moment because you've got a tackle to make or a ball to catch or something like that. You've got something to do that keeps you from being too worked up from an energy level. But for a lot of the former players I've heard from, who had nothing to do on this Monday night other than watch this game, they were tied in knots way more watching this team play than they ever were when they were playing themselves, because you've kind of got nothing to do with that energy when you're sitting on your couch or sitting in the stadium and watching the game unfold. Did you find yourself feeling that way at all?
Yeah, you described it to the T. I was fortunate enough to be in the stadium and got to watch it live and just feel the atmosphere and all that stuff. And as you said, playing, I think when I was a freshman, I was a little bit nervous here or there. But as you got used to it, it was just a normal game. Playing in SEC championships, some big games like that. You never really felt the way I did as a fan. That nervous energy, that twitching. Like you said, your mind is on the game. Your mind is on that drive or that play. And you just don't allow yourself to kind of get outside that moment. But sitting there where you don't have any kind of control of anything, you're just spectating, you're just watching. You can feel every up and every down, and it's a roller coaster, especially when it's a close game like it was. But the emotions are special, and it's it's a love. It's a fanatic love. So it was awesome to be there.
So obviously the wide receiver position, even in the aftermath of winning the national championship, has been a little bit of a hot topic the last few days. And since you played the position, I think your opinion on this is really valuable. Everyone's talking about the fact that Jermaine Burton has now chosen to transfer from Georgia, go to Alabama. The reason why, I would say, is obvious. Alabama does have a history of getting more prolific stats for its receivers, more so than Georgia does, even though Georgia beat Alabama. This is still an area in which Alabama has excelled. What did you make of Burton making that decision and the fact that we kind of exist in an era now in college football where these kinds of choices are just more possible than they used to be? What do you make of this situation, Sean?
Yeah, it's tough because times have changed, and I remember when I was playing, you would hear older guys talk about their day and how times were different and all that stuff, and the game is evolving, and the student athlete is evolving. You got money on the line now, and different things. So if I was to go back into my time and my era, it'd be unheard of. Of course, kids transferred. It wasn't as much, but we got kids going to Florida or going to Alabama. These are big time SEC rivals, and again, in my day of time, that wouldn't sit right with me in the locker room, and I'm sure even at Alabama or Florida, accepting a Georgia guy wouldn't sit right with them. But we gotta move on with the times, and this is where we're at. Kids are different, and the atmosphere in college programs are different. We as Georgia, we accept the Clemson guys that come, the West Virginia guys that come. So Alabama's going to accept Burton, and it's just a different time. So as a older school person now, it feels funny. It doesn't seem something that would naturally occur, but again, you got to adjust with the times. Kirby's doing a good job of adjusting with the times and getting in the portal himself. So that's just the game that we're living in right now. So we got to deal with it.
I think one of the most difficult decisions that Kirby Smart probably faces is who plays, how much they play. For instance, in the case of Georgia, I don't think anybody can deny that the offensive system that Georgia employed this season worked. Georgia scored nearly 40 points per game. They obviously won the national championship, and they also did so in a way in which the defense was able to thrive there as well. Some of the teams that seem to throw it the most, defense seems to suffer. For Georgia, both sides of the ball seem to work pretty well. But even within the context of that, Sean, there is a debate that goes on, and frankly, I listen to one person say one thing and one person say another thing, and I think both sides kind of make a pretty good point on this. The Georgia, historically, for the most part, under Smart, has rotated a lot at receiver, where a lot of people get to play. It's pretty common to see 9 guys catch a ball in one game for Georgia. They're rotating, getting a lot of folks involved. But on the other hand, a lot of guys, including Burton, who's obviously a talented player, maybe they don't play as much at Georgia as they would play at another place. As someone like yourself who knows what it takes to play wide receiver at the SEC level, at Georgia in particular, very, very successful career, what do you make of the fact that Georgia does rotate at wide receiver a lot? Is that, in your mind, more of a good thing or more of a thing that maybe Georgia should reconsider in the future?
I think it's a combination of things. I think that we have a lot of extremely talented receivers. And Pickens was that guy that was a game breaker and a game changer. And I think had he been healthy, he would have been a guy that was featured and maybe not as rotated as much. But then you got a lot of guys that are have a little bit different things they bring to the table, and it's a good mix to rotate them and all that stuff. So I don't think Kirby is like if he has that guy that AJ Green type player that he's going to feature that guy, and that guy's not going to come off the field. But if he has a lot of complementary players that are good and have different things that they highlight, he's going to find ways to use them and mix it up. And I think that just has been our situation as of late. We really haven't had, outside of George Pickens, again, he's been hurt. That featured guy that demands to be on the field, demands eight targets a game, so to speak. Where Alabama's had some early first round draft picks that are going to be top 10, top 15 picks, and it's just a different situation. So as a recruit, Georgia's they run a pro style offense. They're going to get the ball out there, and if you're that guy, you're going to come in and you're going to have the ability to be featured. So I wouldn't shy away from it or think that Kirby's only going to rotate you and you're not going to be featured. You just have to prove that you can be that guy, and he will feature you.
Let me do one more thing, Sean, before we let you go, and I certainly appreciate your time here today. The other thing that kind of exists around the wide receiver position for Georgia right now is there's an open coaching position there, and there's been some talk amongst fans. They wouldn't mind seeing a former Georgia wide receiver get some consideration, whether it's Hines Ward, who has worked in NFL staff, now wide receivers coach at FAU, or Terrence Edwards, who's a friend of our program and a guy that I know who works at Pace Academy, works as an individual coach with a lot of the players who have actually gone to the Georgia roster. Some chatter about a guy like Brian McClendon also being in the mix here, who I know there as well. I mean, what do you make about the desire on the part of a lot of fans to see a former Georgia receiver get some consideration to be the guy that helps get the most out of these receivers going forward?
I mean, those three guys, I think it's, in my opinion, and of course, Kirby has to do his due diligence, and this is what he does for a living. So, at the end of the day, I'm going to trust whatever decision he makes. But as somebody who's pretty familiar with the three of those guys, I would say all three of them are you would be home runs. You can't just be a Georgia guy and just get in. The Georgia guy is a bonus, but as you said, Terrence is working on a day-to-day basis with the guys that are trying to get to that level as far as the high school receivers. He's the offensive coordinator at Pace Academy. He does FBU camps and travels around the country, and he sees all the talent. And he's a technician. He coaches the little details. And then again, being a Georgia alum, his passion, being from the state of Georgia and all that stuff is there. So he's a home run. Brian McClendon, I played with Brian, and he's come up. He showed that on the college level he can go out and recruit and also develop. He's been an offensive coordinator at the college level. He's been on the East Coast, on the West Coast. He's been on the Georgia staff. He's another homegrown Georgia guy. So that just gives that extra thing. And then Hines Ward, he has probably the longest NFL career out of all the guys. He's another Georgia guy, born and raised. He's got the experience by being in the NFL for a couple of years now, down in Florida, coaching on the college level. So between those three guys, it would be an extremely tough decision. I'm rooting, hoping that one of those three guys is the one that comes through. But I think it's not just they played at Georgia, so give them the job. It's no, they've cut their teeth. They've developed guys. They've been coaching, and all that stuff. So they deserve the job as well, not just let's just give it to them because they played at Georgia.
Sean, this is a fascinating conversation. I appreciate your insight on all of this, and obviously we remember your career, and every time you stop by here, we always have so much fun with you. So thank you so much for being a part of the show here at DawgNation Daily today, and hope we get a chance to talk to you again very soon.
Definitely. I appreciate you having me on, and I look forward to the next time.
All right, good stuff there from Sean Bailey, former Georgia wide receiver, and interesting to hear him say that. I know we're a little bit out of order compared to what we normally do, but we'll kind of transition now into an Around the Doghouse, furnished today by our friends at Rooms to Go. But very interesting to hear Bailey say, hey, I know Hines Ward, and I think he'd be great at this job. I know Terrence Edwards. And also, he lays out the resumes here. This is a guy that knows these guys very well, and lays out all the reasons why he thinks that Terrence Edwards would be good for that job. And then also talking about that in the person of Brian McClendon here too, who's I think kind of always been in the chatter here, always been as a part of this discussion. And of the three former Dogs that we'll mention here for this, he is the one that has, I would say, the most traditional resume. You know, Ward, Edwards, a little bit of a non-traditional choice in that, you know, they haven't yet been position coaches at the SEC level. They haven't quite had that. McClendon, by comparison, he's been on the Georgia staff, you know, before, for instance. It is a little bit more of a traditional coach. And, you know, we did talk to Terrence Edwards about this last Thursday, and I just asked him directly. I said, you know, Terrence, there are a lot of Georgia fans that want you to be wide receivers coach. And is this the kind of thing that you would want to do? Now, you have to understand the full context of all this, that in a fishbowl, everybody would want to coach at a place like Georgia. Who wouldn't? But I've also had former SEC assistants at different places other than Georgia, just across the league. One of the things they will tell you is that the time demands are, even though you know going into it, it's going to be a lot, it is still almost more than you can fathom. When you see the expectations, the list of things they think that you should do for them each and every day, and a lot of this is outreach to future recruits, of course, that even understanding it's going to be a big time commitment, when you see the daily task list that must be accomplished, even that can still be overwhelming and all that. And Terrence is in a time in his life when he has young kids and he's got, you know, a family. And so we said, understanding the context, the fact that you are raising a family and obviously succeeding at the level, high school and personal coaching level and all the things that you're doing, is this something that you would truly want to do? And I'll give Terrence a lot of credit for giving a very candid answer. This is him from DawgNation Daily last Thursday.
Of course, I would love to coach on the college level. I would love to go to Georgia as the receiver coach or at some capacity. I would love that. That would be the sweetest thing, I think, for me and my family. My wife is a Georgia alumnus. My kids love it. You know, everyone knows my brother's wife, Tracy. My wife's mother went to grad school. So my whole family is Georgia. We bleed red and black. And if that's in the cards, I would love it. Do I love what I do now? I love coaching at Pace Academy. I was the offense coordinator at Pace Academy this year. I love doing my wide receiver training, developing young kids too. So I think my knock as a coach is a developer, and I would love to be on the college level to do that.
So I am really glad that Terrence gave the answer that he gave. I'm glad that he was as candid about that as he was. And it actually kind of reminds me a little bit of what Hines Ward told me going back years ago, that when Kirby Smart first got hired at Georgia, Hines Ward, in much the same matter-of-fact way that Terrence says that. Now, by the way, the clip from Terrence was longer than what I just played. That you know, I just for the sake of time, you can't play the whole thing. He also went in the same, you know, conversation, talk about how he does have a family, he does have those things to consider. So he's not necessarily free to go work at, like, say, just make up some school, Sam Houston State. It's not like Terrence is in a place in his life right now where he says, I'm so committed to being a college coach, I'm going to go work at Sam Houston State or Portland State or a place like that, start at the very bottom and travel around. You know, a lot of these coaches move from job to job to job to job to job before they finally kind of move into that thing. Terrence is just a little bit different station of life. And so he talked a little bit more openly about that, but very candidly says, if I had the chance to do something like this, of course I'd want to. I believe my strength is I developed Reed Gilbert, I developed Justin Robinson, I developed Jermaine Burton, working over the years with, Tavares King and guys like that who've, played the high college level, played the NFL level. This is what Terrence does. He says, this is what I bring. Terrence is also a great advocate for players, so we understand the way in which a lot of times these position coaches are the go-between, the insulation from the head coach who has a lot to think about, and keeping all his players happy can't always be top of mind for him. The position coach is a little bit more of an advocate for the players than his position group. We know Terrence would be good at that part of it, and so it's really nice to hear Terrence be as candid about that as he was. It does kind of remind you a little bit, as I said before, of what Hines Ward told me way back in, late 2015, early 2016 when Kirby Smart first got hired, and Ward kind of put his hand in the air and said, I want to be his wide receivers coach. And I think there was a time in which some of that from Ward was disregarded because at the time he wasn't a coach. At the time he was just a rich dude who, maybe some people thought just kind of looked at college football coaching as kind of a cool gig of like, hey, I'm bored. I can only play so much golf, so let me just go be a position coach at a place like Georgia. Trust me when I tell you, it is not for the half committed. As I said before, I had a former SEC assistant tell me that his head coach told him that he needed to write 100 handwritten notes per day. Like, in addition to just knowing a bunch about football, he had to have penmanship. He had to write notes, 100 of them every single day to recruit. So this is not the kind of thing that if you're a rich guy who's just bored, being a position coach in a place like the SEC is not necessarily going to be for you. And some people maybe assume that Hines Ward misunderstood what he was getting into by basically throwing his hat into the ring. But since then, Ward has proven to be someone who's more than just hey, I'm kind of shooting off at the mouth about this. He went and worked as a relatively low staffer for the New York Jets. He's now at Florida Atlantic. This is a guy who may be in a slightly different position in his life where he is willing to bounce around a little bit. He is willing to go down to Coral Gables and work at FAU or at a place like that to demonstrate that he wants to earn his stripes. He wants to be at the lowest level of this sport, whether at the NFL, college level, as a way of maybe eventually getting into a situation like this. Now, I say all of that to say this, is that I'm a little bit of a Terrence Edwards homer, so I'll openly tout for him to get the job. That's just, I'm not even going to pretend to be anything objective on that. I love Terrence. I'd love to see him get it. Also, I have really great respect for the way in which a guy like Hines Ward has done what he did. It reminds me a little bit of probably like Deion Sanders some, but the other thing it kind of reminds me of is Patrick Ewing. We don't talk a lot of basketball on this show. This is kind of a football show, although shout out to the Dogs last night taking care of business against Alabama. We'll do more of that before we're done. The point here is, though, like Patrick Ewing, said, hey, I want to be a coach. And everybody kind of rolled their eyes. Patrick Ewing not going to be a coach. But look at all the things he did. He was on the bench for a bunch of years. Like I'm talking about, low-level assistant, the NBA level. This is Patrick Ewing, basketball Hall of Famer, but he's basically just doing his thing as a very low-level, modest assistant coach at the NBA level, and sure enough, works his way up over and over. Finally, he's head coach at his alma mater, Georgetown. You see a lot of these big-name athletes who are rich enough, they don't have to work, but they kind of want to be a coach, and they do the hard work necessary to become a coach. And I think Hines Ward's kind of doing that right now. I think it's actually a fairly inspiring story. But the issue at Georgia right now might be, let's just be candid here for a moment. Georgia needs improved wide receiver play. Georgia fans want the wide receiver position to be as successful as the other position groups in the program are. Now, while I do think Georgia fans take that too far sometimes, and I do think there's a relatively odd obsession with wide receiver play in comparison to the overall success the Georgia program is having, fans in general aren't wrong to say it'd be nice if this position group was as successful as the other position groups. And so from that standpoint, maybe a little bit more of a traditional choice is what wins out now. If you want to keep it just to the ranks of former Georgia players, maybe the Brian McClendon resume, because he has been a recruiter, maybe that ends up winning out this time. I mean, if you want to go back and look at McClendon's time at South Carolina alone, they won some recruiting battles that Georgia wanted to win. If you just want to focus on receiver alone right now, would you have liked to have Josh Vann from Tucker High School in a Georgia uniform, especially with the way he played against you this past season? Would you have liked to have had that? That's a recruiting battle that McClendon won while he was at South Carolina. And talk about Marshawn Lloyd, things like that. You can do that too. But just at the wide receiver position alone, McClendon's won some recruiting battles that Georgia would have liked to have won while McClendon was working somewhere else. So ultimately, McClendon may be the more traditional choice. And if you're going to keep this to the universe of former Georgia players, that might win out for now. But it would not surprise me. It would really not surprise me if we have the same conversation a few years from now that Terrence Edwards is a part of that conversation again, with maybe even more consideration then than he might get now, or Hines Ward is a part of that conversation in the future in a way that maybe there's a thought he's not quite ready yet, maybe not quite seasoned on that yet, but heading in that direction to do some of those kinds of things. Either way, I understand why Georgia fans like the idea of former Georgia players as Georgia coaches. I do kind of understand that. All things being equal, I guess I probably enjoy that too. And the good news is, between McClendon, who's a part of this conversation, Hines Ward, who has been a part of this conversation for years, and Terrence Edwards, who justifiably is a part of this conversation now there as well, there's a pretty good crop of former Georgia players who truly could be on the staff at some point in time in the future. We'll make that around the doghouse. It's furnished today by our friends at Rooms to Go. And listen, when you're talking about filling out a coaching staff, that's obviously not an easy thing to do. The same way when it comes to filling out a room there as well. We are in a time in which a lot of you, we've had a kind of a very active real estate market the last, however many months, couple of years, and that means a lot of you are in a new home. And when you move into a new home, it can be a little bit jarring. It's kind of like I'm in a relatively new studio here too, and when I look around the studio, I see a lot of bare walls, and we just haven't had time to decorate this the way we kind of like to. We're new into the place, and in your home, you're kind of the same way. You look around, you say, hey, one of these days I'm going to, have this thing all decked out and looking good, but for now, we're just kind of trying to get settled in. Well, one of these days may be now when it comes to our friends at Rooms to Go, because whether you need just that single piece of furniture or you do need to do what Rooms to Go is famous for, which is furnishing the whole thing, the entire room, Rooms to Go's got you on that. I'm talking about whether it be living room furniture or dining room furniture, your children's bedroom, your own bedroom, whatever you want to do around the house, Rooms to Go's got you covered on all of that. Outdoor furniture there as well. You love the outdoor living space, the patio stuff, all the cool ways in which folks are taking advantage of their outdoor living space right now. All of that is really fun. Rooms to Go can get you taken care of with all of that. Whether you want to stop by and see them inside one of their showrooms and sit on the furniture, touch it, feel it, imagine what it would be like in your own home, or if you'd rather just start your shopping experience online at roomstogo.com. Of course, the word two spelled out T-O, roomstogo.com. Rooms to Go's got you covered. They've been furnishing around the doghouse for us all year long, and they can furnish your home as well. Accent piece, individual piece of furniture, or the entire room. Let Rooms to Go take care of all of you on that. So if you're just joining us on video, radio, something like that, we went a little bit out of order a little bit today in that we talked to Sean Bailey a little earlier. Mike Griffith's on vacation. We'll get Mike again next week. It was really fun to have Sean on the show a moment ago. Great stuff about McClendon and Terrence and Hines Ward, their candidacy as Georgia's wide receiver coach. And I think some pretty realistic thoughts. I mean, remember, Sean Bailey's a guy who caught 2 touchdowns in a SEC championship win for Georgia. So when it comes to opinion on wide receiver, that's a pretty credible voice. And he shared his thoughts on, the Burton thing and kind of what's next for Georgia wide receiver. If you missed that, go back and hear that. Pretty interesting stuff from him. But for now, let's kind of move on to the rest of the show. All the rest of the SEC stuff, things happening around the league right now, mocking Alabama after its basketball loss to Georgia. A lot of fun stuff to do before the show concludes. So what do you say? Here on DawgNation Daily, we roll on and do that right now.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Great to be able to have you here for our SEC Through, and great to say that we are cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. I can say that my wife and I have been talking a lot about Royal Caribbean cruises as of late because it's going to be a big year on the seas for Royal Caribbean. Going to be a big year for us being on those Royal Caribbean cruise ships, and I'm ready for that. I love doing the show each and every day. Totally acknowledge that. However, every now and then I kind of get a little bit ready for a little bit of a vacation there too. It just sort of, I'm the kind of guy I can't go too long without being in the sunshine. I can't go too long without being near a beach, on the water, something like that. That's just what my body kind of craves. And obviously, seeing this video each and every day of all the fun stuff happening around Royal Caribbean cruise ships makes me feel that way even more. Such a beautiful fleet of ships, including brand new ships like the Odyssey of the Seas and so many cool things, and so many of those ships going to Perfect Day Coco Cay. You've heard me talk about this before. The amazing private island that's there in the Bahamas, which is exclusive for those on a Royal Caribbean cruise ship. And that matters because one of the things you'll hear, all kinds of chatter about just how much fun Perfect Day Coco Cay is. There's a thrill side, there's a chill side. The thrill side's like the greatest water park you've ever seen, and it's amazing that it's actually right there in the middle of the Bahamas, but it's an amazing water park, tallest water slide in North America, largest freshwater pool in the Bahamas. There's a chill side, which is, more like the floating cabana type thing, to be frank. That's probably more of my deal. I probably would enjoy the floating cabanas more than anything else. My kids, though, they love the water park and all that kind of stuff. They're dying to get there and see that themselves. So we love Royal Caribbean cruise ships because of the fun. I mean, let's face it. We all need a lot more things to look forward to in our lives, especially as we move towards the upcoming new year in that year right now. And so Royal Caribbean cruise ships, one of the things I'm looking forward to here in 2022. So when you're booking your own Royal Caribbean cruise, my invitation is check out the Cruise and Vacation Authority. It's tcava.com. That's tcava.com. That's the website. Or you can also give them a call, 770-952-8300. That's 770-952-8300. I'm telling you right now, they'll set you up, they'll get you on board, and give you all the tips and tricks you need to make your Royal Caribbean cruise vacation the best it can possibly be. With that said, let's go on now with our SEC through here, cruising around the SEC with Royal Caribbean. And, sometimes the transfer portal giveth, sometimes it taketh away. We know that. In the case of Alabama, it has given to them in the person of Jahmyr Gibbs, and in the person, it's obviously former Georgia Tech running back, Jermaine Burton a few days ago, but also reports coming out that Kamara Wheaton, former 5-star running back signee, he's now on his way out of Alabama. Now, for the Crimson Tide, if it's a trade of an inexperienced Wheaton for an experienced Gibbs, in the short term, that probably works out to the Crimson Tide's benefit. No denying that. But in a day and age in which negative recruiting is a big part of what goes on around college football, I do believe the way in which teams use the portal is going to be noticed. In other words, you remember the old office supply thing with the easy button? You push the easy button. I think for coaches that use the transfer portal as too much of an easy button of, hey, we have a chance to get better, we're going to go to the portal and get that guy. But we're also going to log jam and block the chance at playing time for young players in this program. People are going to notice that, whether Georgia does that or Alabama does that or whoever else does that there are some programs that simply don't care. I mean, there's a lot of FCS-level programs that don't even sign high school players anymore. There's a lot of low-level group of 5 teams that don't really sign a lot of high school players anymore. There are, division and conference-level group of 5 teams that are more reliant on the transfer portal than the high school ranks themselves. There are some programs, in other words, that have gone all in on transfer portal. But the very best programs are not going to do that. The very best programs are still going to use high school recruiting as their number one mechanism to bring in players, because what you hope is that by doing the hard work necessary to bring in a high school player, you can keep him for at least a couple of years, if not 3 years, and in some cases even 4 years, whereas the transfer portal only invites you to do the same level of work in a new player 1 year later in most cases. So for those programs that still want to be top-flight programs in recruiting high school talent, when you use the recruiting portal to the detriment of the high school players that you sign, programs are going to notice that. So how you use the portal when you need it without using the portal so much that it kind of tarnishes your reputation amongst the next generation of high school players, that will be watched pretty closely here, whether it's Georgia or Alabama or anything else. By the way, speaking of transfer portal, there's some chatter as of late that Caleb Williams could be in play for Wisconsin. I have no Caleb Williams, of course, former Oklahoma quarterback in the transfer portal. A lot of folks thought he was going to just kind of follow Lincoln Riley to USC. Eventually, that's what he might do. There have been some Georgia fans wondering, well, could Williams be in the mix here for UGA? Never have quite known what to think about that necessarily, but now all of a sudden you see Wisconsin emerge as a possibility. And all I can really do is shrug about this there as well. I mean, this is one of those things where I guess we won't truly know what he's doing until he does at USC. Probably remains the point spread favorite in all of this. I guess it's fair to point out that Wisconsin's done pretty well to transfer quarterback before. When Russell Wilson left NC State to go to Madtown, it worked out pretty well then. So maybe back in competition for a guy like Caleb Williams right now. Who knows on that? And then one final story here. One of the things that you get a lot in the SEC, and one of the reasons why we love the SEC, I'm sure we'll do a little bit more of this on SEC Country Live later on this afternoon, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, the tug of war between programs when it comes to assistant coaches. That you've always got one program trying to poach from somebody else, and that just kind of thing kind of goes on a little bit. Recently, Ole Miss did take Sam Clark, cornerbacks coach, away from Arkansas. One of the things we've said that Sam Pittman's done really well is hold on to his assistant coaches, especially at the coordinator level. Seems to have won the battle to keep Kendall Browse this year, won the battle to keep Barry Odom a year ago. But Sam Clark did leave as cornerbacks coach to go to Ole Miss. Ole Miss has had its assistant coaching staff completely raided so far this offseason. And so now it looks like Dominic Bowman, who's most recently at Marshall, he may be the replacement there for Pittman. I realize this is kind of down in the weeds in terms of SEC coaching staff movings, but I did want to make sure we gave it to you just so we could say that we did. And we'll also take some time to say that is cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Let me also give a couple of shout-outs here just for a moment. Our friends at the Finnish Long Drink. Of course, we love the Finnish Long Drink because, let's face it, it tastes good. It is a ready-to-drink cocktail that comes right out of a can. That's kind of cool, right? It looks like a beer, but it's not a beer. It's a ready-to-drink cocktail, and it's delicious. I think you're going to really enjoy it yourself. In fact, a lot of you have tried the 8-can variety pack, which is 2 different cans of the 4 varieties of the Finnish Long Drink. There's a traditional, comes in a blue can. It's got a gin kick with kind of a grapefruit flavor. There's the Long Drink Strong, 8.5% alcohol by volume. I know some of y'all like that. Long Drink Zero carbs, 0 sugar. Long Drink Cranberry. My wife loves that. Just whatever your mood is, your taste is, there is a version of the Finnish Long Drink for you. So if you go to thelongdrink.com, put in your zip code, you can find out where you can pick some up. A lot of folks back on golf courses again. The Finnish Long Drink's been very popular here on golf courses in the Atlanta area for a good long while. It's warm enough now that you've been able to play some, and you can enjoy yourself some Finnish Long Drink while you do. Bars, beverage stores, all of that. Just go to thelongdrink.com, and you can do that there. Let me also give you a couple of golden shoes here before we sign off today, because there was a pretty cool moment last night. Admittedly, sometimes maybe we don't do as much basketball around here as we should. I grew up a very big college basketball fan. It just seems like the football conversation's gotten so big it becomes hard to squeeze anything else into a show. But I do want to give a shout-out to Tom Crean and the Georgia men's basketball team for getting its first SEC win last night over Alabama. It's a big upset. Georgia was 13, 14-point underdog. Am I right about this? Double digits, I believe, if nothing else. We got a big win last night, and I think we have a couple of golden shoes that we can share to shout this out. Our buddy Mad Dog, who's had a few of these over the course of time, says, just like football, which you love to see, and he's got the agony of defeat there with UGA going after, is it Big Al? Is that the name of the elephant? Is that Big Al there? But nonetheless, just like football indeed, as Georgia gets a celebratory win against Alabama in basketball last night, and it's fun to watch. Georgia fans have another thing to kind of brag about when it comes to its arch nemesis, the Alabama Crimson Tide. Kind of a nice thing to consider there on that. I believe we have another golden shoe we can show you there too. So Jim Triglio shared this with me. He says, "Hey Brandon, updating the hat collection, out with the old and in with the new." And so what you see here in the videos, the picture in front of you is, it's the brand new 2021 National Champions hat alongside the old 1980 National Champions hat. Now, what I put on Twitter in response to Jim on this was, I love seeing the side-by-side image of the old national title hat and the brand new one just looks good together. But I said, hey, if you're really throwing out the old hat, I probably know a few thousand folks that wouldn't mind taking that off your hands. And Jim said, no. I'm not throwing out it. I'm just not going to be wearing it as much anymore because I'm going to be wearing this one instead. Because I got to tell you, maybe it's just my own personality, but how cool does that block G, the old school hat look right there, the mesh back, sort of almost a little bit of a trucker style almost. I mean, that's a cool hat. Not to say that the 2021's not cool, but that old school national champions hat, a little bit like the old G from the old baseball hats, the one they won the title in 1990, a little bit of a similar style G. I'm telling you right now, that is an artifact right there, a very cool hat all the way around. So we'll give you a golden shoe for that. In fact, we may even trade you the golden shoe for that hat if you want to. But nonetheless, congratulations, a couple of golden shoe winners for today. One more shout out before we're at the door here. Don't forget, conference title games in the pro football ranks coming up on Sunday. Big day for action there. Great chance for you to get some action down on the game when it comes to our friends at BetUS, America's most beloved sports book. Been that way for more than 25 years. The way you become that way is by taking good care of your players. That's what BetUS will do for you. So go to BetUS.com, use the promo code DN125, and you can get 125% sign-up bonus. That means that when you put money in your account, BetUS is going to put more money in your account to start things off. So you put in $100, they're going to give you 125. You got 225. You're literally a winner before you even make your first bet, before you even win your first bet. So check out BetUS.com and use the promo code DN125 for a big 125% sign-up bonus. So we had a lot of recruiting stuff on the show off the top here today, and I'll invite you tonight to check out Jeff Sintel Before the Hedges presented by Kroger, and you can get a lot more of those final maneuverings for the Dogs before National Signing Day is upon us next Wednesday. Jeff will have good stuff for you tonight Before the Hedges by Kroger on all of that. Also, Sean Bailey, great stuff from the former Georgia wide receiver today in place of Mike Griffith. Mike taking a little vacation time. He'll be back with us again, I believe, next week, and I'm sure back on the site here again. No telling when, but we'll look forward to hearing from Mike then there at that point in time. I'll see you this afternoon as well, 3 p.m. Eastern time for SEC Country Live. All the big stuff happening around the SEC. We'll do that for you this afternoon on SEC Country Live. Can't wait to do that then. By the way, lousy stinking Gators. Always nice to give them a reminder. Long national title drought now. 4,766 days since they've even come close to sniffing a national title. And in Jacksonville, 276 days from now, they tote home another L. That is our Gator Hater Countdown. We will see you tomorrow here on DawgNation Daily and on video. Time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. We'll take your comments on all the various platforms. And, of course, we appreciate R.S. Andrews making it possible. They are the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. Heating systems, they've been working a little overtime as of late. And if you're worried about yours, if some fly-by-night company's told you need a new heating system, they're just maybe trying to pull the wool over your eyes or something like that, listen, get a second opinion from R.S. Andrews. Dari, Payroll, the whole team over there. They'll have one of the technicians come out. He'll show up on time. And he'll do exactly what he said he was going to do, which is give you a $99 mega tune-up. In other words, somebody told you that heating system's old, it can't do anything for you anymore. R.S. Andrews can give you a second opinion on that and breathe some new life into that system to keep you warm here this winter. So trust R.S. Andrews on all of that. All right, let's do a little bit of DawgNation.com, and then we'll do a little bit of YouTube and a little bit of Facebook. And we'll go a little longer with the comments today because, admittedly, we were pretty short yesterday. Astro UGA said, are there any rumors about other Georgia players considering the portal? Yeah, I guess there were a million of those. I mean, frankly, one of the things we probably should have done on the show today was, mention the fact that, Kyrus Jackson did affirm his plans to return to Georgia next season. I think it's a pretty big deal. Probably should have mentioned that a little earlier. My bad for not. But then, you've had the Darnell Washington thing of, well, the Instagram was scrubbed of all the Georgia stuff. Now it's back on there. And, honestly, the worst thing about the portal right now is, and we're not completely against player freedom around here. We're not. But the worst thing about the portal is that for a Georgia fan, you're never quite able to, there's never a moment where you can just kind of relax and just sort of say nothing more to worry about here, nothing more to see, because players leave at any time. I mean, wasn't there a women's basketball player that's like very good that put her name in the transfer portal this week, like in the middle of the season? And I know nothing about that story, so I can't even really say, why or what was to happen there. But the point is, as whether it be spring practice, whether it be summer, whatever else, you can never be quite even 4 games into a season. That's another little minor window that's popped up there as well. You could never be quite so sure that you don't have something afoot when it comes to all of that. But that's just kind of what it is. So the bottom line is there have been plenty of rumors about other players. Darnell probably the most prominent, and a lot of the Instagram stuff seemed to be the genesis for that. But I think a lot of that's died down, at least for right now. Brian Whitehead said the Kirby copter was all over Middle Georgia yesterday. Hit Warner Robins and Peach County and what is JCHS? I'm probably going to embarrass myself here on that. What is so Peach County, Warner Robins? What is JCHS? Am I embarrassing myself? I probably am. Matt Rukvina, by the way, good to see him at DawgNation.com. Feels like we haven't seen Matt in a while. He says, take a look at Florida's 2022 schedule. They have 7 home games. They might go 6-6. Couldn't happen to a better bunch. Jones County. Oh, Brian, my apologies. My boss here at DawgNation, he's got a connection to a Jones County, so he will be mad at me for not giving the proper shout out to the good folks from Gray, Georgia, down there at Jones County. So Brian, my bad on that. Cat story there as well. I knew I knew I was going to embarrass myself. The good folks there in Gray, Georgia, home of former Major League Baseball player Rondell White, former Cincinnati Red Willie Green, and a whole host of other folks there as well. Randy Hall says fans want A.J. Green, a healthy George Pickens, McCole Hardman, Brock Bowers in the field at the same time. Yeah, listen, that'd be a pretty fun quartet. No doubt about that. Matt Rugavina says he has been here, just yelling at FedEx while my title gear isn't still here yet. I have to admit I was a little concerned about this, that it was going to be the intersection of unprecedented demand. Georgia fans want that national title gear with, let's face it, the old supply chain ain't exactly humming along right now. So, yeah, there you go. By the way, good to see E.J. Lightsey, or at least a reasonable facsimile thereof, in the comment section right now. Shouting out Zion Reagan's. Pretty good stuff there. Hassan says, how will the offensive line look in 2022? Good question. So, the one thing that bedrock right tackle Warren McClendon. Now, is there any chatter about maybe moving him to the left? I don't know about that. But Warren McClendon is bedrock. Like Warren McClendon is boring in the best possible way. You understand what I'm saying? Like, nobody ever says anything about him. Nobody ever really notices him. Warren McClendon's just over there just keeping quarterbacks clean, moving. He just moves the earth. Warren McClendon is so good at his job that you almost forget that he's even doing his job. That's how ruthlessly efficient he is. So McClendon, boom, he's there. SVP at center, you got to think that's also a thing where he's got that locked down. You would say Broderick Jones, based on the way he played the national championship game, he is now at the forefront of being a starter for you next season. Now, as I said before, is that definitely left tackle? Warren McClendon definitely a right tackle? Maybe it is. Maybe we'll talk to John Stinchcomb one day about, other than just blindside protection, why one spot may be different than the other. But maybe Broderick is now the guy that's your left tackle because of what he did for you in the national championship game once that substitution was made. Now, what happens after that? I do believe that if Tate Ratledge had not gotten hurt, Ratledge was heading for a very good season for Georgia. I've had a lot of high school coaches tell me that they just were incredibly impressed by him, just incredibly impressed, that he's just one of these maulers, one of these, I don't know if you compare him like, Quentin Nelson, like just one of these guys that's just a street fighter in the interior of an offensive line for you. And Georgia's best five this season was going to include Ratledge had he been healthy. That might have, because I think most of would say the Georgia offensive line in 2021 is probably not great. May have been good, almost certainly was, but probably south of being great. Well, if Ratledge had been healthy, would that have changed that? Would Georgia have had a great offensive line? Would the running game been more prolific? And for those people who are mad that Georgia only won games by 17 points, maybe then they were winning games by 27 points. That Ratledge could have made that big of a difference, extra touchdown per game or something along those lines. So let's say he's coming back. I have very easy time assuming that Ratledge is probably a starter for UGA. So now you get to a big name. Now you get to Amarius Mims. And, Mims just got to be on the field for Georgia next season. That's too good of a prospect to go 2 years without earning significant playing time. And, maybe it's in the super sub type role. Honestly, Jamari Salyer is going to make himself a lot of NFL money, and he did that for a while. People don't just necessarily guarantee themselves, automatic playing time at a place like Georgia. But Amarius Mims needs to be a big part of your story next season. That just needs to happen. So can you play him at guard? I don't know. Maybe you can. Does somebody else move to guard for Amarius Mims? I don't know about that either. But that's the five, right? That's your best five. And I'm sure I'm probably leaving out somebody that's really important, and I apologize if I am. But that's supposed to be the best five, is it not? Y'all check my math on that to make sure I'm right. Yeah, Brian Jones sounds like he's got the same five I do in some. Jim Gunner also says that Kirby was at Brookwood yesterday. I think that Dylan Lonegren's a really good prospect. And this is one of those things where if you talk about all the reasons why Kirby makes the big bucks, this is where you make the big bucks, just to be completely frank, is that Georgia has to be perceived to be all in on Arch Manning. And they should be. Arch Manning looks like a pretty good prospect. Once again, I talked to a lot of high school coaches. A lot of high school coaches think Dylan Lonegren's really good. Alabama visited him the other day. Lonegren's the Brookwood quarterback. And, Kirby obviously visiting more than just Lonegren. But, you gotta be all in on a guy. Right now it appears to be Arch Manning. But you also got to at least keep close enough proximity so that you can, shift gears if you need to and go towards a guy like Lonegren, who I think is probably a pretty good prospect. CB says Kirby was also at Warner Robins. Dude gets around. So I didn't know this. I was on the radio this morning with the guys over at 960 The Ref, my good friends, Logan Booker and Dave Johnson, the morning show there for 960 The Ref. Big fan of both theirs. Big fan of just the show in general and the radio station. Love 960 The Ref. And they were telling me something I did not know, that there's this old school Florida guy, kind of a pro Florida type reporter. And I guess he was ripping Kirby. Now first of all, this is what I kind of enjoy. That the pro Florida media, the only thing they have left to really get on Georgia about it. You had the guy the other day who was like, well, Georgia won the national championship, but did they really maximize their potential? Like, that's such a loser comment. I just hate to say that. There's such a when you are relegated to, you won the national championship, but were you really as good as you could be? That's like you are taking the biggest L in the world if that's what you're hitching your wagon to. And then you got the other guy that they were talking about on the radio this morning, which was, I guess he was criticizing Kirby Smart for taking a helicopter all these places. That, well, it'd actually be more personable for the recruit if he drove in a car. Like, how does that make any sense? First of all, recruits like the idea of seeing the helicopter. You watch Succession, things like that. I've been watching. You see these things like the helicopter. There's a certain panache to all of that, and plus Georgia's a big state, and you want to go from, like the other day, Kirby was at Colquitt, and then he was over at Lowndes, Valdosta, and probably Lee County too. I think it was Lee County there as well. Like, if you're going to be moving around all these different places, these South Georgia counties are huge. There are 159 counties in Georgia, but the ones down south are big. And so you're going to get from place to place, you're going to have a helicopter. Atlanta traffic, got to have a helicopter. That Kirby's just not going to waste any time. That's the one thing that the people that I've known that have spent time with him, like the one thing that's what they'll come away with. That how is a guy like Kirby wired differently? That's the way in which a guy like that is just wired differently, is that there is zero tolerance. There is an allergy to any kind of time waste. And so motorized vehicles are a gigantic time suck if you've got the money to be in the air. And so that's just what Kirby Smart's going to do. And I don't think we sometimes fully appreciate being in those helicopters is a little tricky. In a windy day, things like that can be a little tricky. Mitch Monteith says, helicopter over car. Kirby's all over the Florida coaches. Yeah, I mean, listen, if the only thing you've got left to criticize Kirby is that he deigns to take a helicopter somewhere, then you are really grasping at straws. CB on the subject of the White House visit. So I do not want to get into politics on this at all. I don't. But do teams still do that in like coronavirus world? I know that, they were doing that as recently as a couple of years ago, but are we doing White House visits again as a society? Because listen, as I said before, I don't care who the president is. And I promise you, please, 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 please don't make this about politics. I don't care who the president is. And we've seen people turn down White House visits on both sides over the course of years. If I get offered a chance to go to the White House, you better believe I'm going. I don't care who the president is. It can be the guy on this team or the guy on that team, whichever party. If I get a chance to be in the White House and go and be celebrated on whatever lawn, I don't care who it is. I'm going. That's a cool moment for Georgia. It would have been, in my mind, during the last administration, would be right now during this administration. If you have a chance to go to the White House, I think you go. But I don't know that we are doing that anymore. I don't know. Foster Moss says, can the Dogs get Kirby to recruit for the basketball team? I mean, one of the things that's a big problem for Georgia basketball right now, like how many Georgians are playing for Auburn? Like, it's almost scary to think. I remember years ago when Bruce Pearl was at Tennessee, I was working for a radio station at the time in Atlanta, and Bruce Pearl would just come on the station all the time. Like you could get Bruce Pearl as a guest just like that because Bruce Pearl wanted to be famous in Atlanta. He wanted to be very well known amongst Atlantans. So Atlanta radio wanted to do an interview. Bruce Pearl was doing it. Bruce Pearl, for as long as he's been in the SEC, has always viewed Atlanta as his place, the same way that, a lot of folks kind of view, like, Memphis has always been a big high school basketball town. It's one of the reasons why, Memphis a lot of times has been good, because Memphis itself is a big spot for recruiting. So, Arkansas and that area up there, that's a big town for recruiting. Atlanta, over the course of the last couple of decades, has actually become a better high school basketball town, I believe, than it once was. And, a guy like Bruce Pearl has always identified Atlanta as a real important part of his recruiting repertoire. And I think one of the things that hurts Georgia basketball right now is you have these Georgians who are doing well for Auburn. And that's kind of always been Bruce's thing. Let's see what else. Wally Smith says it's great to be a Dog fan. It really is. It really is. And, I mean, listen, and I think it's important to remind ourselves that the overwhelming majority of us are having a great time with all of this. And yeah, like the Burton thing brings up a lot of this, and sometimes we argue with each other. But I've told you before that I really don't care about that. Like come in here, let's argue. Let's argue about who should be starting at what position. Let's argue about whatever. Like sports fans argue. Like, look at what happened yesterday around the baseball stuff, like the Hall of Fame. And if you're a sports fan, you just have an opinion about stuff like that. Now, maybe some of you don't care about baseball, but if you do care about baseball, you got an opinion on the Hall of Fame. Should Barry Bonds be in related to the steroid stuff? How come Big Papi got in when he tested positive and the other guys don't get in when they didn't? Andrew Jones, which I think as a Braves fan is a little bit of a travesty. This is what you do when you're a sports fan. You just argue about stuff. And, 99% of the arguing that we do here is all in good-natured fun, right? If you think so-and-so should be starting, I think so-and-so should be starting, but just have it out, and you shake it off and you move on. There is a level of this that becomes a little bit distasteful, because I do think there's a small pocket of people that don't have fun, and therefore they don't want anybody else to have fun. But most of us, as Wally said, it's great to be a Georgia Bulldog. Georgia's the reigning national champion. And the conversations we get to have, because I love this time of year. I was telling my wife this yesterday or the other day. It used to be this time of year was a time in which, hey, you were in a hurry to turn the page to next season because you were trying to forget some bad memory from the previous season. Just to be totally frank, that most seasons end badly, heartbreaking loss, whatever else. And so this is the portion of the year in which hope springs eternal. And typically speaking, doing the show, it's one of my favorite times of year to do the show, because it's the first time we start actually talking about the upcoming season as being we move that into the present tense. And I really enjoy that typically. I was telling her this weekend or something, though, that it's a little weirder now because it's almost like I'm not quite ready for the old season to end. Georgia's the national champion. I'm not quite ready for that. But nonetheless, time marches on, and we're starting to look ahead now to 2022. And when you look at the open spots that Georgia has, when you look at the positions that need to be filled, yes, there are some gigantic shoes left to fill, some very big players who are leaving this program. It's going to sting a little bit to think about them playing on Sundays instead of Saturdays. But when you look at the overall talent level that exists to fill those positions, that actually becomes a really fun conversation too. And so let's have it out. Let's get the best 11 on this side of the ball and the best 11 on that side of the ball, and let's share our thoughts about who that is. So I think that Wally's 100% right. I have not gone to Facebook yet, but I also told you guys I would try to stay with you for a good while today. So let me do that right now, as long as you want to. Some of y'all, you got lunch plans, things like that. So if you have to leave, no worries. But I'm going to try to stay here for a little bit if I can. And if there's like 4 of us left, we'll just talk amongst the 4 of us. All right, over here on Facebook. Nick Roundtree says, I'd just like to point out that Warren McClendon and Jack Podlesny are national champions in the same UGA team, but also represent both high schools here in Glenn County, Brunswick High School and Glenn Academy. That's really cool. Shout out to the 912 there for that. Daryl Fleming, love your show. Appreciate that. Thank you so much. Really good stuff. Let's see what else. Kevin Cook also pointing out Pete Rose for the Hall of Fame. So here's something I heard. And I'm not going to turn this to a baseball conversation because I know some of you will come and find me if I do. You'll be that upset about it. I think I saw this where 4 of the top 40 players in career, I think it's WAR, wins above replacement. That's kind of a fancy baseball stat. 4 of the top 40 players in the history of the sport are not in the Hall of Fame. Rose being one of them, Bonds being another, Clemens, I believe, is the third, and I think A-Rod's the fourth, I believe. That you've got these 4 guys amongst the top 40 players in the history of the sport, and they are not in the Hall of Fame. In Rose's case, he may very well likely never be, at least not while he's living. Bonds, Clemens, they're now off the ballot here. So I'll say this just very, very quick, and I promise I'll stop talking about baseball. If people want to hold the stuff against Bonds because of the fact that he ultimately, like the thing that always comes back to me for Bonds is it's the legacy of Hank Aaron that was tarnished because of Barry Bonds' accomplishments. Like in a roundabout way, honestly, the steroid era is kind of fun. Big players, bunch of home runs. Go back and watch on YouTube for those of you who may be not quite old enough to remember this. Like the 99 home run derby in Fenway Park. Like I've shown this to my son before because he's a baseball fan, but obviously not alive back then. It's like you have all these guys like the Incredible Hulk, and they're just hitting the ball. I'm talking about to New Hampshire. They're just sending the ball so far past the Green Monster Wall, like into the streets, hitting balls in Boston places that don't exist. I was at the 2000 home run derby in Atlanta. What Sammy Sosa was doing, he was parking baseballs in places at Turner Field I didn't even think were possible. In retrospect, the steroid era was actually kind of a fun era to live through. Most of us probably admit that. However, Bonds, what he did, even though he's a Hall of Famer before he started taking steroids, what he did tarnished the reputation of Hank Aaron. 755 now is not the hallowed record that it deserves to be because of what Barry Bonds did. And if you want to hold that against him for that, I at least can listen to that argument. And with that said, no more baseball, I promise. Let's see what else. Tony Elliott says, how about Sammy Sosa? I used to go to every Braves game back then. When I was late 90s, I was spending so much money going to sporting events. It's insane. Like I didn't have any money. I was living at home with my parents. I was still in college. I had zero responsibility and like just a tiny amount of money, but I was spending it all on tickets. I was just going to everything. And I used to go to every time one of those big sluggers came into Turner Field, I'd go to the Braves game and I'd go to batting practice. Like now I think they actually have a little bit of a pregame schedule that's harder to see batting practice than it used to be. They don't open up the gates until like 2 hours before. But back then, Turner Field opened up the gates like 3.5 hours before the start of the game. I don't know why they changed, but they have. And I'd watch all these batting practices. The best batting practice show ever. Not McGuire, not Bonds. Sammy Sosa was the best batting practice guy you'll ever see. Ever see. He was insane. Joanne Whidbey says you can now get a red and black style scarf for the national championship. So for those of you that like the scarf, you want an actual Georgia branded one, you can get that. By the way, Jimmy Durham, good point too. I should probably mention this. The UGA baseball tickets sold out again, hoping for a solid year from the Diamond Dogs. Foley Field is so much fun. First of all, the sport that I've probably come to appreciate way more in the last couple of years than ever before is college baseball. College baseball is a blast. Let me tell you this. I think college baseball is this close to really emerging in a big way. And if you're Major League Baseball, especially down here in Atlanta, Braves country area, because, Braves country is Alabama, Mississippi, Carolinas, things like that. There's a very good chance the Major League Baseball season does not start on time. There's still work stoppage right now. There's these two sides, owners, players, far apart. If this thing is delayed in starting. And the only level of baseball that exists are these weekend SEC series at Foley Field, at Founders Park in Columbia, or various places like that. If the like Starkville, all the billowing smoke coming out there from when they're doing the tailgating, obviously at Baton Rouge, what that place is, y'all. If the only brand of baseball that exists this spring is college baseball, there are a lot of folks going to find out how much fun that is. And honestly, Major League Baseball may lose some fans because of that. Because these weekend series in this SEC, they are so good. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, big ace pitcher going on Friday. Both teams doing whatever they can to try to win the series on Sunday. Man, it is good. College baseball is really good. And the Diamond Dogs have great support, and it's really fun. If you get a chance to go to those games, really fun. And it's hard to get tickets. I tried to take my family a couple times last year, and it's just hard to get tickets. Let's see what else. Rasal says LOL baseball. Yeah, I knew I'd get some of that. How about Terrell Humphrey? Passed the CDL test. I'll tell you right now, that's a good living. Terrell's going to be rolling in money here pretty soon because, driving a truck like that, we have some of our best folks here on this show, our best listeners, best, whatever, are truck drivers. That's a great living. And right now, we need all of you need to go do, if you want a good, rewarding career, go do what Terrell did. Become a truck driver because, hey, it's good money. It's good money for sure. And we got to have stuff. We don't. No, there's not a single thing on this desk, not a single thing anywhere in this studio that wasn't delivered by a truck at some point in time. So we need truck drivers. We need them bad. And good for Terrell for becoming one. And that's a cool accomplishment there too. Sometimes I wonder, because I see all these like people going to tailgate, stuff like that, and they drive the big RVs. I'm always like, could I drive something like that? Could I drive something that big? And I start thinking, could I get my CDL? Because when I was in high school, it was very common that the coaches drove the bus. You go to basketball camp or something like that. The coach drove the bus, just cheaper. These coaches are doing everything they can to like maximize their budgets. In other words, if you're going to basketball camp and you got to pay a bus driver to take you up there, take you back, that's money that's coming out of your program. And if you can do anything to keep that money inside the program, you're going to do that. So it was very I don't know if they do it as much now, but it was very common back then. A lot of coaches were also, they didn't drive buses during the week, but they just had their CDL so they could drive a bus when the team was going to play a game. It was actually a good way to get hired. It's a good way to have if you want to be an attractive coach for a program that needed one, have a CDL, know how to drive a bus, you could get one. A lot of times I think about that. Like, could I drive a school bus? Could I drive an RV? Could I drive? I know for a fact I couldn't drive an 18-wheeler, but I've kind of thought about that before. Michael Webb, this is actually a really interesting point. Let me read this. He says, how about hiring David Cutcliffe as a quarterback consultant, essentially an analyst, what he's saying. Ties to the Manning family, that's definitely true. Can develop the position, that's definitely true. Doesn't need to be long-term. I would say that's probably attractive for both sides. So the comment actually scrolled past me now. I think it's a pretty interesting idea. I don't really know what Cut wants to do, but first of all, when he was head coach, there were two coaches that had a long history of performing well against the spread, like better than chance would dictate. One of those guys for a long time was Bill Snyder. He was like 70% in his career against the spread. Cutcliffe was a little bit of a plus coach as well when it came to performance against the spread. So whether it be at Ole Miss or at Duke, relative to expectations, he was a pretty good coach. And prior to that, as offensive coordinator, obviously had some success there too. Clearly has a relationship with the Manning family. There's no limit to how many analysts you can hire. I mean, so maybe you bring in a guy like Bobo to be an analyst, bring in a guy like Cutcliffe there as well. Now, this is just folks talking. That's not to my knowledge, a report anywhere. But, yeah, I kind of like the idea of it. Somebody said, do you need a CDL to drive a school bus? Yeah, you do have to. I don't really know what the how do you – I don't really know how you know what is and what isn't a CDL class vehicle. Like if you rent one of these like U-Haul trucks or something like that, you don't have to have a CDL to drive one of those, I don't think. but a school bus you do. Now, why you do, why you don't, I'm sure it's got something to do with the number of wheels or axles or whatever. I honestly don't know. But you do have to have a CDL drive a school bus. And by the way, we need more school bus drivers right now too. Let's see what else. Let me go one more trip around the comment section, then we'll get off the air. Kevin Mills says, I love being congratulated as if I actually played in the championship game. I'm just a fan, dude, but thanks. So, Kevin, I'll tell you a true story. I have gotten to where I congratulate people all the time. You know, in other words, I would see people in Indianapolis or in the days after that, and they were Georgia fans, and I just got such a great response back when I did this that I just kept doing it over and over again. I was like, hey, you know, good to see you, whatever. And, you know, that mentioned something about watching the show or whatever. It's like, hey, man, congratulations on a great season. And they just kind of smile. It's like, yeah, it does feel good to be a national championship fan. And that's a little bit – the book Top Dogs is out now. I believe some of you may have already gotten your copy because I've heard from a couple of you on this. Yeah, there you go. Top Dogs. You can see how to order it at triumphbooks.com/Georgia Wins, 800-888-4741. That's the number, 800-888-4741. But the point here is that that's a little bit what I wrote about in the book was the way in which we all contribute towards a national championship like that. You know, not coaches, not players, but there is a certain we factor that kind of goes into winning a national championship. And, you know, listen, it's not a thing I can put on my resume, but it does feel like an accomplishment. I was alive and I was there to see Georgia win the national title. And it does feel like, you know, something I'd been, even though it's an accomplishment I had no control over, it still feels a little bit like an accomplishment. And so I've been congratulating people for it, and they always have a big smile on their face when I do that, so I enjoy that. This is a good question from Randy Hall. He says, could you see the SEC football coaches driving the team bus? So who would you trust if if a SEC team a la my old high school days had to get somewhere, which SEC coach would be the best at driving the bus? I think Shane Beamer would drive the bus. I don't think he'd wreck it. I think he's the kind of guy I'd feel okay about doing that. I don't know that I want Kirby Smart driving the bus. Now, figuratively, he's doing a good job of driving the bus as the Georgia program. He feels like the kind of guy that's just a little too – he's too tightly wound, right? I mean, remember, you got lives in your hand when you're driving the bus. Could I trust Kirby Smart to drive 2 hours without checking his phone? You know, this is a guy that's – you know, a lot of folks want to get in touch with him. Kirby's trying to keep all, stay in touch with recruits. I don't know that I want Kirby Smart driving a bus. I just they're too easily distracted. I don't want him doing that. I definitely don't want Mike Leach driving a bus. I don't want Lane Kiffin driving a bus. For Kiffin's multitude of reasons. I mean, I don't think Nick Saban could drive the bus because I'm not quite so sure his tiny legs could reach the pedals. As far as other coaches, Josh Heupel, could he drive a bus? Honestly, if I saw Josh Heupel driving a bus, I probably wouldn't think one thing about it, one way or another. It is a good question, though. Who would you trust to drive a bus? I'm not really quite so sure what that means necessarily, but a couple of SEC coaches I could probably see driving a bus. There are a few I wouldn't want anybody driving a bus. Colorado Ski Dog says, let the mailman drive the bus. He'd get you there for sure. He'd get you there. Philip Thomas says, not a former coach, but Ed Orgeron. Honestly, I think Orgeron might be better than you might think. Now, he'd be flying 90 miles an hour in the left lane the whole time. Eli Drinkwitz, yeah, he's another one of these guys. If he's driving a bus, I'm not quite so sure I'd even think one thing about it. It's like, like to a degree, Eli Drinkwitz just sort of looks like a bus driver, so I'm not quite so sure I think much about that one way or another. But Orgeron, I could see him just flying down the left lane, 90 miles an hour, loosely obeying traffic laws. For sure. I thought what I said about Saban was mean. What Cincy Dog said over here at DawgNation.com is even meaner than that. That's funny. All right, a couple more. Sacred Grove says, don't even come over to YouTube because of the parental advisory sticker. There's no telling what's going on here. Raphael White's a truck driver, been one for 15 years. I think it's a great job. For some reason, I've always been fascinated by being a truck driver. I always think that I would be Now, I don't know that I'd be a good enough driver to be a truck driver, but I have the kind of personality that I think I would be good at that. I always, like, to be frank, I don't mean to give free advertising away here, but obviously one of the things we like doing when we're traveling is, whether it's Jeff and me, Connor and me, those are the guys I most frequently travel with, certainly my own family, we go to Buc-ee's all the time. Buc-ee's in Calhoun, Buc-ee's down there, Fort Valley. We just like going to Buc-ee's. But in addition to liking Buc-ee's, I like all the truck stops. And like I said before, I hate to give them free advertising, especially that one because it's owned by a Tennessee booster. But Love's and Flying J. I just love truck stops. I've always loved truck stops, love 18-wheelers. Karl Malone owned one. For some reason, I've always been kind of fascinated by like the 18-wheeler culture. Sometimes when my kids were young, we'd go to those touch a truck things. You ever do this with your kids? And a lot of times they'd have like brand new 18-wheelers that you could kind of explore around in a little bit. Like the sleeper cabs always seem really cool to me. I don't know why, but I've always been pretty fascinated with 18-wheeler, culture a little bit, trucker culture. Christopher Rule said I'd be telling long jokes without watching the road at all. Yeah, unfortunately, that's probably the case. It's like I probably got everything to be a truck driver except for like the requisite driving skills. But also, like, you can learn a lot about driving just by watching truckers. Watch the way they, drive. Obviously, like, their career's on the line. You can't be reckless as a truck driver because you can't get hired somewhere. Their career's on the line. So if you watch the way that a trucker drives, it sort of teaches a little bit about how you should probably drive yourself. Let us see what else. Robert Barnes says Muschamp would be a trip driving a bus. Yeah, he's another one of these guys, Robert. I think you're right. I don't know that I want him driving a bus. Any of these guys that seem like they have an attention span that's as long as my thumb, I'm not quite so sure I want them driving a bus. I got to have somebody who's a little bit more mild-mannered than that. Our buddy Scott Green says, you got to drive for a NASCAR team. Weekend job, your son can go see the races. That's exactly right, and my son would certainly love that. Scott knows all about that NASCAR world. I got to imagine those big haulers, because if you see those big NASCAR haulers, they're huge. I got to imagine that's a whole different level, even compared to an 18-wheeler, because you got to have room for like spare cars in there, and obviously you go to some of these places like NASCAR Hall of Fame's got a pretty cool replica of one of these inside trailer things, and they're gigantic. They're huge. But that would be pretty fun. Also, if you're going to the track, the haulers, how close they park to each other, I'm always kind of fascinated by. I mean, they, at least to my eyes, they're this far away from each other, which is seemingly probably pretty hard to do. Jonathan Aaron says, I don't want to get Greg Hendricks' comment too, but let me read Jonathan first. He says, if Bennett goes down, who do you think would replace him? And if the backup plays good, does Bennett get his starting position back? Remember, he's in front. So a lot of folks, Jonathan's saying, hey, we saw a guy get injured last year and lose his starting job to Stetson Bennett. Could the same thing happen to Bennett? Well, I don't know about that particular situation, but the one thing I will say is that I'm not 100% convinced that Stetson Bennett, whether it be for whatever reason, will be Georgia's full season starter next year. I do believe that he's earned the right to get the first rep of spring practice. You got to pick somebody. You might as well pick the guy that just led you to a national title. But I definitely think that guys like Brock Vandegrift and Carson Beck, assuming they're both here next year, and I guess they'll both at least be here for spring, but I would like to think that both those guys should be treated as more than just, hey, they're battling to be the backup quarterback. I mean, a guy like Brock Vandegrift was a 5-star after all. And, it's not, while I don't think that he's behind schedule because he didn't play this past year, moving into his second year, he ought to get some consideration. And a guy like Carson Beck will be moving into his third year much the same way. Now, I do think that Stetson's going to be difficult to beat out because I think he actually played pretty well last year. But to answer your question, if it's just an opinion, just one man, one vote, the guy I'm really interested in is Brock Vandegrift. That's not to denigrate Carson Beck in any way, but Vandegrift is a guy I'm really interested in. And I'm also interested in him not only just being Georgia's backup, but maybe pushing to be the starting job. And if he plays well enough that it pushes Stetson Bennett to be better, then that's good for Georgia. Or if Bennett, who we know has set a standard of not just the fact they won the national championship, but the overall statistical benchmark performance, pretty good, that if Vandegrift has to exceed that to win the starting job, that's really good too. So I do think it's an open competition, and I think it's going to be watched pretty closely. Also in the comment section, Greg Hendricks, I think, mentioned this about, like, the one thing I do not do on the roads. Like there are probably a lot of things I do, that I shouldn't do. But the one thing that I have just learned is very dangerous is, the 18-wheelers have to leave a lot of room in front of them because they don't stop quite as quickly. And so, like, the one thing you see a lot of cars do, and this is so dangerous. First of all, don't pass 18-wheelers on the right side. That's one thing that you should just never do. But the other thing is like, so let's say the 18-wheeler's here. The car comes shooting past it and then gets right in front of it. In some cases, will stop right in front of the 18-wheeler. Those 18-wheelers cannot stop on a dime like that. They just can't. And I've seen wrecks happen that way. I see truckers get mad all the time because that's just so dangerous. First of all, it's putting your own life in jeopardy, but it's also, this trucker's trying to get somewhere. We got a supply chain issue. I can't have this trucker on the side of the road having to fill out a police report because you cut him off and stopped right in front of him. Trucks just don't stop that quickly. So that's one of those things I try not to do. Let's see what else. Kirby's visor and others. What did Foghorn and Langhorn do? I didn't see any of this. But Christopher Hansen says I'm giving driving advice. Just that one piece of advice. I like Christopher Rules. Brock to the ship. Oh, that's right. You have Brock throwing to Brock. I like that. That's pretty good. It kind of makes me want to do, Randy Hall's kind of mentioned we need to have a soundboard. I kind of want to get Paul Heyman from WWE going, Brock. I kind of want to do that for those guys. Christopher Hansen says, which position group will be the best in the 2022 team? Running back's going to be hard to beat. Defensive back may be pretty good. Some of it inexperienced. But running back going to be hard to beat. Yeah, for now, running back seems like the one that's hard to beat. All right, anything else? Sacred Grove. Y'all always giving G Grace a hard time. I feel like he does okay for us. All right, final comments on Facebook, then we are going to get off the air. Barry Watkins says it's B&B. I like that. Steve Highland says need to rush for 250 yards a game. I would love to see that running game get back to what it once was. I think so. All right, couple more. Philip Jordan Wells says Foghorn Leghorn. Yeah, Philip, I honestly don't know. I think I've missed a lot of what's happened on YouTube lately. Like, there have been a couple times recently where YouTube has been even more off the rails than normal. And for a while, I would say that it was Facebook that probably suffered from that. But a couple times lately, YouTube has just been, I don't even know what. And today hasn't been quite one of those days. But, man, there have been a couple of them lately, for sure. Chris Free says Gunnar Stockton's legit. I'll tell you this, the game I saw him in was probably not his best game, the one I saw him in person. He's tough as they come, man. He's tough as they come. He's bleeding, just profusely. I still don't quite know why he was bleeding so bad, but just profusely bleeding from the face. Had to change his jersey at halftime, and he's just out there just – he's tough. He's really, really tough. Really, really tough. Daniel Aldrich says, I saw a cool Georgia golf cart I want to buy. Yeah, I always feel like that, like, relative to cost, like, the golf cart's one of the most luxurious things you can have. It just seems really cool. And some golf carts are really expensive. Some of them not quite so expensive. But, like, the people in my neighborhood that have golf carts, everybody envious. Just one of those things. Like, even though I kind of like walking, I feel like, to me, the thing about having a golf cart in your neighborhood, you're sort of one step away from becoming the kind of person that goes around the motorized scooter in Disney World. It's like, which is, if you need that, obviously, that's one thing. But it seems like some people are kind of fudging the line of who truly needs one of those things. The point is, I want to be careful about that. I want to use my legs here. Otherwise, I'm afraid I won't, be in good enough shape. But the point is, still, the golf cart is a pretty nice luxury, especially if you got one branded with UGA and everything else. So that's good stuff. All right, we got to go. We have made good on our promise to do long comments. We have really done them today. Doug Rayburn says, Branson, Brock, and Brock, the killer bees. Yeah, that kind of goes back to the old Houston Astros days when you had Derek Bell and Jeff Bagwell and Craig Biggio, which continues our streak of talking a lot of baseball on today's show. Barry Watkins says, no golf carts, bikes for the rest of us. Yeah, that's probably a pretty good thing to be able to do. All right, let me give a shout out here to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution online, ajc.com. By the way, Andrew Jones did not make the Hall of Fame. Good coverage of that. I think it's one of those things we just got to talk more about, as Atlantans, those of us who care about the Braves, things like that. Dale Murphy, 398 home runs outside of Cooperstown. Andrew Jones, 10 Gold Gloves, 400 career home runs outside of Cooperstown. I feel like those are errors. I don't really know what you do about that, but I feel like that's kind of a thing we got to talk about here a little bit. Also, the rest of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. You want more coverage of Georgia's basketball win against Alabama, and why would you not? You can do that. And for Falcons fans, yesterday was kind of a fun day. Get a chance to say goodbye to Sean Payton as Saints coach. That's kind of a cool thing. And maybe soon Tom Brady is Bucs quarterback. So Atlanta, by doing nothing, may find itself at the top of the NFC South by the time this offseason's over with because of the way in which the Saints and the Bucs are handling their business. The point is, you can read all that online, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, ajc.com. Hope you all have a great day. Appreciate R.S. Andrews making the R.S. Andrews cool down possible. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. If your water heater goes out, in many cases, R.S. Andrews can replace it for you the same day. Just find them online at rsandrews.com. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow, 10 a.m., DawgNation Daily. Look forward to talking to you then.